Hello and welcome to Crossfire, the show that dives into the heart of global conflicts, where nations collide, alliances shift, and lives hang in the balance. On tonight's show, we tell you about the big shifts taking place in West Asia as a new ceasefire takes shape in Gaza. But is it enough to hold the peace? Also on the show, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has taken a firm stand at Davos, calling for Europe to strengthen its defense in the face of Russia's growing military might. Stay tuned as we break down these critical developments and explore their impact on the future of global power and security. From Davos to the icy frontlines of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky is delivering a powerful message to Europe. Stand united, boost defense, and secure the future. As the conflict with Russia enters its third year, Ukraine's president is warning that the stakes have never been higher, with threats not just from Moscow, but even from North Korean troops joining the fight. So what does Zelensky's call to action mean for Europe and beyond? Here's the full story.
In a passionate appeal at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged Europe to establish itself as a strong, global player capable of defending its continent against threats, especially as the conflict with Russia rages into its third year.
Let's not forget, there is no ocean separating European countries from Russia. And the European leaders should remember these battles involving North Korean soldiers are now happening in places geographically closer to Davos than to Pyongyang. Russia is turning into a version of North Korea, a country where human life means nothing. But they have nuclear weapons and a burning desire to make their neighbors' lives miserable.
Zelensky warned that Russia, despite its smaller economy, is outproducing Europe in military hardware and has mobilized an army of 600,000 in Ukraine, with the potential to increase to 1.5 million. He pointed to Moscow's ability to enlist foreign troops, including North Koreans, in battles close to Ukraine's borders. Zelensky proposed that enforcing any peace deal would require at least 200,000 allied troops, a minimum he emphasized as non-negotiable. Zelensky also ruled out any reduction in Ukraine's military size, a demand he said Russian President Vladimir Putin is likely to insist on.
Найшвидший шлях – тиснути на Сполучені Штати, щоб Україна не була в НАТО, і тиснути на всіх союзників, щоб вони нас тиснули, щоб ми зменшили армію в 5 разів. Ось це і буде. Це те, що він хоче. Не буде, я маю на увазі. Ми не дамо цього зробити.
Zelensky has held discussions with leaders including France's Emmanuel Macron and the UK's Keir Starmer about a potential peacekeeping mission. While Starmer promised the UK's full support, he stopped short of committing troops.
And therefore, as I say, we'll play our full part when it comes to guaranteeing Ukraine's security. But we must never lose sight of the absolute need for Ukraine to be in the strongest possible position as we go into 2025. Thank you.
Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump, fresh into his second term, pledged to end the war, first promising a swift resolution within 24 hours, and now extending his timeline to 6 months. His team has floated peacekeeping plans, including mobilizing 200,000 international troops. Moreover, Trump has said that he would likely impose sanctions on Russia if its president, Vladimir Putin, refuses to negotiate about ending the war in Ukraine.
You've called for a ceasefire in Ukraine. If Vladimir Putin doesn't come to the table to negotiate with you, will you put additional sanctions on Russia?
Sounds likely.
And
Yeah.
do you think that the war should be frozen currently along
The war
the
should have never
lines?
started. If you had a competent president, which you didn't, the war wouldn't have happened. The war in Ukraine would have never happened if I were president. But that couldn't happen because the election was rigged.
Zelensky, however, remains cautious, emphasizing the importance of NATO membership as the ultimate security guarantee, a point of contention with some European nations and the US. Meanwhile, on the icy front lines of Donetsk, Ukrainian soldiers continue intensive drills, preparing for combat against Russian forces. The 24th Mechanized Brigade, which includes both new recruits and experienced soldiers, are undergoing 45 days of rigorous training to ensure battlefield readiness.
Наверно, складно все, тому що все заново, все нове для тебе, нова інформація, то треба все вивчати з самого нуля. Скажімо, більший поток інформації надається, так. Інструктори дуже стараються, викладаються, виводять все доходчиво.
The soldier has also rejected calls to lower Ukraine's conscription age from 25, insisting that young men should have the choice and the maturity to enlist.
18 років – це доволі такий юний період, і люди там ще, ці хлопці ще не сформувалися, вони не мають якогось ні життєвого досвіду, а тим більше не мають ні бойового досвіду. І 18 років брати їх одразу на штурм – це трохи глупо. Мені кажеться, це має бути, якщо він навіть буде йти, це має бути свобода волевиявлення. Да? Тобто він має, якщо він осознанно хоче, він розуміє, що він зможе, 18 років, то без проблем. А якби робити принудительно для всіх, це, я вважаю, що це неправильно.
As the war shows no signs of abating, Zelensky's message to Europe is clear. Unite, invest in defense, and prepare to secure the continent's future. Bureau Report, India Today Global.
The fragile peace in West Asia faces its first real test. While a ceasefire in Gaza has temporarily halted months of relentless violence, tensions remain dangerously high, with new developments unfolding on multiple fronts. Let's break it all down for you in this report.
A 24-hour communication hub has been established in Cairo, led by negotiators from Qatar, the US, and Egypt to safeguard the newly brokered ceasefire in Gaza. The hub aims to address violations swiftly, with mediators working around the clock to prevent escalation. Yet, the peace remains fragile. Medics in Gaza have already reported casualties, claiming 8 people were hit by Israeli fire since the ceasefire began. President Donald Trump, whose envoy played a key role in brokering the deal, expressed skepticism about its longevity. While claiming credit for the agreement, Trump distanced himself, calling it their war, not ours. Despite his remarks, Qatari officials remain optimistic, citing his administration's critical role in securing the deal. The first phase of the agreement focuses on humanitarian relief. Over 900 trucks carrying essential aid and fuel have entered Gaza since Sunday, offering a lifeline to a region devastated by 15 months of war. However, trust between the parties is at an all-time low, with hostage exchanges and prisoner release scheduled to ensure accountability on both sides. But even as talks aim to stabilize Gaza, another crisis is brewing in the occupied West Bank. Israel's security cabinet has launched a significant military offensive in Jenin, targeting what it calls terrorist infrastructure. On Tuesday, the large-scale military operation in Jenin killed at least 9 Palestinians, including a child. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed the operation, named Iron Wall, involves coordinated efforts from the Israeli military, police, and Shin Bet security agency. Netanyahu described the raid as part of a broader campaign to counter Iran-backed militias. Palestinian groups including Hamas have called for escalated resistance, with local fighters engaging Israeli forces in intense clashes. Hardline Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has framed the operation as part of a strong and ongoing campaign to protect Israeli settlements and settlers. Smotrich, who has long advocated for aggressive expansion in the West Bank, recently praised Donald Trump for lifting US sanctions on settlers accused of violence against Palestinians. He also hinted at new war goals, emphasizing security in the West Bank as a priority. The situation in the West Bank has been further exacerbated by violent settler attacks. Palestinian villages have been targeted in retaliation for recent shootings, with homes, businesses, and vehicles set ablaze. Human rights organization accuses Israel of using the Gaza ceasefire as cover for intensified operations in the territory. The United Nations has expressed alarm over the violence. Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for maximum restraint from all parties, while the UN Human Rights Office highlighted concerns over settler violence and escalating military actions. Jewish settlements in the West Bank, deemed illegal under international law, remain a flashpoint for the ongoing conflict. Meanwhile, in the US, controversy has erupted over comments by Donald Trump's nominee for UN ambassador, Eli Stefanik, who endorsed Israeli claims to the entire West Bank based on biblical history. Critics argue such views undermine efforts towards a two-state solution, long seen as the cornerstone of American Middle East policy. As West Asia stands at a critical crossroads, with a fragile ceasefire in Gaza and escalating violence in the West Bank, the path to peace seems as uncertain as ever. As world leaders call for restraint, the question remains, can this delicate truce hold? Or are we on the brink of a renewed conflict? Bureau Report, India Today Global.
Keeping our focus on West Asia, the ceasefire in Gaza has brought a halt to over 15 months of relentless fighting between Israel and Hamas. But for Palestinians returning to their homes, the devastation left behind paints a haunting picture of the cost of this conflict. Entire neighborhoods have been reduced to rubble, livelihoods have vanished, and the pain of loss is etched to the faces of those trying to rebuild. In this next report, we take you to Rafah in southern Gaza, where the destruction is overwhelming and the path to recovery seems unimaginable.
Palestinians in Gaza are returning to what can only be described as an apocalyptic landscape. A ceasefire between Israel and Hamas has paused more than 15 months of intense fighting. But for those coming back to their homes, the devastation is overwhelming. Rafah is one of the many cities in Gaza bearing the brunt of this war. For residents like Manal Salim, the return to what was once home is nothing short of heartbreaking. Manal, a single mother of 6, worked tirelessly to build a life for her family. She lived above her hairdressing salon and wedding dress rental shop. Today, both her home and her business lie in ruins.
جوزي راح وشقى عمري راح كل شيء ربي والله يا رب ما عملنا على الجماعة أيتام وأولاد ونشتغل ونترزق من البيت أقسم بالله.
شفنا اللي ما ينشاف في بيوتنا، باب رزقنا وباب أولادي والمحلات، كان عندنا محلات كله راح. اتفاجأنا، يعني احنا قلنا نلاقي إشي نسكن فيه نقعد فيه، لكن دمار مش طبيعي، دمار بخوف، يعني زي أهوال القيامة الصراحة.
Another resident, Murad Bigdad, faces a similar reality. His 3-story building, which housed his electric appliances store, was completely destroyed.
لا فيش حد كان متخيل ولا أنا ولا غيري، يعني أنا لما توجهت هنا وتوقعت كمان حتى لو في قصف كذا إني ألاقي إشي دور، يعني بيت على الدور الثاني 3 طوابق، يعني قلت يمكن الاقي لي تحت محل اصل حالي في إشي كذا، البضاعتي بقت عندي شركه تحت الاقي بضاعتي إشي، بس ما لقيناش، يعني زي ما انت شايف يعني الإشي ما فيش إشي حتى تستصلح زي ما انت شايف، ولا إشي فيش ولا إشي يعني من البيت انك تقدر تطلعه، لو قدرت تطلع إشي مش حتستفيد منه كمان.
Rafah is just one part of a larger story. Across Gaza, the destruction is staggering. Entire neighborhoods have been reduced to mounds of rubble that stretch as far as the eye can see. Refugee camps, once densely populated, now resemble ghost towns. Critics have accused Israel of waging a scorched earth campaign, aiming to dismantle the very fabric of life in Gaza. These accusations, including allegations of genocide, are now being reviewed in global courts. Israel has categorically denied these charges, arguing that its military operations targeted militants operating in dense urban areas. They claim to have taken measures to avoid civilian casualties, though the sheer scale of destruction tells another story. While in Rafah, the cleanup efforts have begun. Bulldozers work tirelessly to clear roads, enabling families to navigate their shattered city.
اليوم نقوم في مرحلة أولى وهي فتح الشوارع لتسهيل عودة المواطنين لمدينة رفح.
However, the challenges are immense. There is a critical shortage of heavy equipment, and the scale of the destruction means that even basic cleanup will take weeks, if not months. Amid these efforts, the question of Gaza's future remains uncertain. The United Nations estimates that if Gaza continues to face blockades, reconstruction could take over 350 years. For many, this grim projection only deepens the despair. In addition to that, the human toll of this conflict is staggering. In Rafah, teams from Gaza's civil defense continue to recover the skeletal remains of victims buried under rubble.
حصيلة ما تعاملنا عليه في اليومين السابقين قرابة 120 جثة متحللة تحلل كلي عظام عبارة عن رفات عظام وأشلاء.
As Palestinians in Gaza return to their shattered homes, they face a grim reality. A future fraught with uncertainty, unimaginable loss, and the daunting task of rebuilding. The ceasefire has brought a temporary pause to the violence, but the scars of war run deep, and questions about governance, reconstruction, and lasting peace remain unanswered. For now, the people of Gaza walk among the ruins, carrying with them both their grief and a fragile hope that this will be the last chapter in a history marked by war. Bureau Report, India Today Global.
That's all we have for you in this edition of Crossfire. See you again tomorrow.